Oh, well, welcome to the Great Old Ones channel. Thanks for joining me tonight. Here I talk about role playing games, and this evening we'll be talking more about the first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons game. Um, One of my favorite subjects because it's my favorite game. And again, I will be bringing on another guest here to discuss things with me, another old gamer. I don't know if he's old. We're just old gamers. That's how that it works. Right. We'll be talking more on first edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So, well, without further ado, I will bring in my guest to jump into the discussion with me. And here we go here. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I love that.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Let's see. Oh, we got a couple of joiners already.
I love that shirt or overshirt or whatever. I don't recall
Little
having seen it.
sweater thing with geek swear or something like that, and it
Yeah.
looks like the Middle Earth map.
Yeah,
So
it's awesome.
that is pretty cool. Yeah, and I'm not promoting somebody else's stuff because they didn't pay me for it, but
Right, right. You hear that, guys? If you want it promoted, you got to pay.
yeah, I don't mind. Send me a free one. I'll talk about it all the time. This is a fantastic. This is the sweater version. You can also buy shirts like, um, if I remember right, they look like button up Hawaiian style type shirts and stuff with it.
Nice.
So yeah, I love this one. Yeah. So I would wear it on stream with my other one. The other one that I wore the last time was the reproduction sweater from The Big Lebowski. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're diving more and more and more in the first edition dungeons. It will never be finished because there's just so much to talk about. You know,
And then even more beyond that. you know.
the subject is going to outlast us. So we had discussed before. We'll throw in some things, and we'll jump right in here. We'll talk about adventuring. I got to remove that one. Oops. Add to stage. There it is. And we'll pull in pages out of the Players Handbook. This is the player facing edition and how Gary Gygax described all this stuff to the players. Um, we'll note that he did say that Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was the follow-on. You started with basic D&D to learn Dungeons and Dragons, and then you went to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons because you wanted to go the next step. However, a lot of that stuff that's in the Player's Handbook is written as if you had never seen games ever before. So you can start with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and jump right into the good stuff right off the bat. So what I figured we'd talk about was page 101 of the Player's Handbook, if I remember that correctly. And we'll start with the adventure. We'll read out some of the stuff and then we'll discuss parts of it. We ought to be able to put in a good full stream on just a few pages out of the Player's Handbook just because there's so much in it. So starting out, when you go on an adventure, you, and in all probability, one or more other characters, and in all probability, one or more other characters. You could very well do this solo, and we'll probably do a stream on that of how to do this solo out of the Dungeon Master's Guide. And all of us, at one time or another, wanted somebody to write us a random dungeon generator using those tables out of there and just make maps for us.
Right.
Yeah, matter of fact, I have a friend, a gamer that I gamed with a long, long, long time ago. I contacted him here or there. He's not doing well health wise and stuff, but he wrote a program. Actually, wrote it on OS2 using C that put out PostScript files, and he called his dungeons that he produced and commercially sold them through Dragon Magazine and stuff, Mammoth Dungeons. And you, depending on how big you wanted it, he would print it out for you. So I said, print me a 10-page, 10-level dungeon, and he printed one out that was 10 pages per level. So it was incredibly cute. And it was just the old school style nonsense jam packed dungeons, and it was great. I've never used it in a game, just because I can't find any good excuse to make it. But it was just fantastic, and that was old school stuff. So we'll talk old school here some more. When you go on an adventure, you and in all probability one or more other characters will go to explore some underground labyrinth or area of land outdoors. Your dungeon master will have carefully prepared a map of the place you and your party are to enter, a map showing all outstanding features of the place with numbers and or letters to key encounter / special interest areas. Your DM will give you certain information prior to the adventure. You might have to ask questions of the local populace, or you might have heard rumors or know of legends, so your party can properly equip itself for the expedition, hire men at arms, and obtain mounts or whatever in order to have the best possible chance for success in dungeon or wilderness setting. Of course, going about a city or town might in itself be interesting, informative, and dangerous. So a third sort of adventure can occur at any time, the city or town adventure. These three major types of adventures have elements in common and differences, so each will be described separately. The various elements of all sorts of adventures are given thereafter. Your campaign referee has detailed information, including charts, tables, and matrices, so he or she will be completely equipped for conducting any sort of adventure. So right there, he's describing what the dungeon master's role was, basically preparing the story for the players. A lot of them, as I recall, for the most part, you had a little short ways out of town. There was a dungeon that you all went in and explored, and there were several levels deep. And then you went back to town, and when you were done, and either got new characters or new hirelings or something because they were killed in the dungeon, divested yourself of vast amounts of coinage that you had to figure out how to carry out of the dungeon. That was one of your preparations that you needed before you went, was how are we going to bring the loot back to town with us, and to sort out those sorts of things. So these,
Yeah.
for new players.
Right, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, for new players, this is what he was describing, and this is what it's supposed to happen. So hop on in there.
Yeah, and it covers, it really covers the pillars of exploration, and typically they're all going to tie together. And I think we've gotten questions before. I know I have, or whatever. It's all sort of a mix about, how you might design a game world for your characters and their adventures and stuff like this. And if you include dungeon expeditions, outdoor expeditions, and or exploration, and cities, towns, you've basically covered all there is to cover, right? Because outdoor can include any environment. Dungeons can be weird, mystical, normal, run-of-the-mill kind of castles, keeps. Yeah. And I really like what I really like here is the old school feel to it. Particularly, this entire section, or maybe the second half of the Player's Handbook, is really kind of written in sort of a novel style. There's more sort of descriptive prose here and ideas. And this was, of course, before, for the most part, before the concept of box text and adventure modules and stuff like that. This is the foundation of the game, as most people remember it. So I'm glad to be looking at this with you.
This is your 50,000 foot view of it, and as we go through pages, he starts drilling down into the details and stuff, describing not so much how to do it, but basically what your dungeon master is going to be doing and what you can expect. So we'll talk about dungeon expeditions first. Adventures into the underworld mazes are the most popular. Most popular. Well, that's basically, if we look at it, how the game really started. You went into the dungeon, beat up some monsters, brought your stuff back to town, and that was pretty much it. Now, with original Dungeons and Dragons, the suggestion was you had the board game Outdoor Survival, use that as your map, and make adjustments to things that were on it. But ultimately, when you went to a hex, there was a dungeon in it, and you had to get into the dungeon to do the rest of the adventuring. The party equips itself and then sets off to enter and explore the dungeons of some castle, temple, or whatever. Right? Light sources, poles for probing, ropes, spikes, and the like equipment are the main tools for such activity. And since none of the party will know the dungeon's twists and turns, one or more of the adventurers will have to keep a record, a map, of where the party has been. Because a game master at this point, he's just describing to you things, and you better be jotting notes down or you're going to be lost. Right? Because the map is basically his, and he doesn't reveal it to the players because all his notes and stuff are on it. He just describes things to you, and you try to reproduce it. Let's see. Thus, you will be able to find your way out and return for yet more adventuring. But I like twists that I like throwing in some of my dungeons here. I'll get to that a little bit later. As your party is exploring and mapping, movement will be slow, and it is wise to have both front and rear guards. In the dungeon will be chambers and rooms, some inhabited, some empty. There will be traps to catch those unaware, tricks to fool the unwise, monsters lurking to devour the unwary. Yes. The rewards, however, are great. Gold, gems, and magic items. Obtaining these will make you better able to prepare for further expeditions, more adept in your chosen profession, and more powerful in all respects. All that is necessary is to find your way in and out, to meet and defeat the guardians of treasures, and carry out the wealth. But like you mentioned here, this was the most popular, but this basically pretty much where it began. You know, there's a meme out there on the typical old school dungeon where you had a town and then a little line, wiggly line across the map, and right next to it was the 140 level dungeon that was there that you went to, and you went back and forth to it. That was originally how this sort of thing sort of started.
And I still to this day, I mean, I love that play style. One of the things that you can miss out. Well, first off, I'll say that that play style is fundamental and foundational to the game, right? So just about every module TSR produced, or even later versions of these things, had some sort of outdoor wilderness type of area, some sort of town, and a dungeon. And one of the things that's really interesting about dungeon expeditions, particularly, when you have a face-to-face group, which I don't have anymore, is that mapping is incredibly rewarding,
Yes.
challenging, and you get that group together and you've played for a long time. There's a synergy between the DM and the mapper. You figure out as the DM how to explain to a particular player how the flow of the map goes, and they get real good at it, particularly in these mega dungeons, and some of them are very, very difficult, but mapping I consider to be a core feature of the game. And we've got automated tools for that in Fog of War and all those kinds of things.
The virtual tabletops, they handle a lot of the games. You can throw the map up there and stuff, but it's taken that element of putting down on paper what the dungeon master is describing to you. It's there on the screen, even though you've got Fog of War and stuff with it, and dynamic lighting and things revealing stuff as you move through. With the map already on the board, you don't have to draw it all out. There's no room for misinterpreting what the dungeon master may have said and getting yourself lost in the dungeon.
Right. And another thing, it's is really fun at the end of the section of the adventure or whatever, or level of the dungeon, to compare with the player your DM's map, or if you happen to be the player, compare your map to the DM's map and see how close they are. Yeah. It's just something, something that I'll never forget, and that I really, really like. I think that's a meaningful addition to the game.
Well, and the getting lost part of it too. I mean, there's rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide about how you can get lost, doing hex crawl adventures and stuff overland, but he didn't put that into the underground because there was a real element of getting lost, misinterpreting what may have been said. As far as, I mean, it wasn't that the Dungeon Master was being purposefully deceiving when he's describing the dungeons or something. but maybe you misinterpreted something that he had said. Or as you move through an area, the dungeon master had a magical moving hole that closed off that passage as you went through it and were gone. And now you go back to it, it's a dead end where was a passage out before. So a lot of that stuff is missing from some of the modern style of play, unless you sit around the table and make somebody actually make that map.
Right.
Yeah. And part of it is a lot of the tropes that came about in Dungeons and Dragons came out of the dungeon exploration. Every party had a 10-foot pole, right? You're sounding the floor in front of you as you're moving through to make sure there's no traps or something along the way. Why would you need to carry a sack full of spikes when you're hiking through the woods? Well, you wouldn't really, but if you were going down in the dungeon and you wanted to spike some doors, because all dungeon doors, the way this is described to me, all dungeon doors are difficult to open, and they will close back again automatically on their own as you move through the dungeon and pass through them. So you could spike them open and things of that nature. Or if you wanted to hole up in the dungeon and get some rest and be undisturbed, well, you had to spike the doors closed so that a curious wandering monster didn't stumble in on you while you're all trying to rest from being beat up. So a lot of the tools, the trope tools, came out of that style of play.
Yeah, and that's something, and it goes into being able to carry out the wealth and properly equipping your character is something. If I'm a player, that I still do, regardless of what sort of medium I'm using to play the game, whether it's a VTT or whatever, because that's really half the fun, and those things are useful whether or not you're sitting face to face or not. So somebody in your party always carry spikes, a small hammer tool, something like that, the 10-foot or the 5-foot pole, the rope, and ways to be able to carry out the wealth. And I think that's something that the people who might be detractors for gold for XP, for example, or XP for gold, might miss on occasion is that stuff's heavy, and it's within. Right. There's a reason that stuff is so heavy in old school. I mean, it's a combination of bulkiness, and you can do scientific studies on it and stuff like that, which I've done to determine coin diameters and thickness and metal densities and weights. But it's all part of the dungeon exploration or the dungeon expedition.
Right. Ultimately, it's not necessarily the size of the coin or something. It's just how it's just not wieldy to just be arbitrarily carried. Right. Tips and tricks and traps and stuff, those are always the fun part of it, where you're trying to sort things out, which is we discussed this on other streams and stuff too. Originally, the characters could all do those sorts of things, and then the thief class was invented, and it took a lot of the safety role away from some of the rest of the characters and put it on having a thief in the group. Where modern gamers, that's where they get the idea that you need a fighter, a magic user, a cleric, and a thief minimum to be your adventuring party. And I've been in plenty of games where that wasn't necessarily the case, but almost every time we needed a thief to be able to get to move through the dungeon successfully. Let's see what else we got here. Outdoor exploration. I did a video not too long ago. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it too, where I talked about my philosophy on mega dungeons, and everything is a mega dungeon if you look at it the right way. Sure. Outdoor exploration. Adventuring into unknown lands or howling wilderness is extremely perilous at best, for large bands of men and worse might roam the area. There are dens of monsters, and dens of monsters could be an entrance to another dungeon, right? And trackless wastes to contend with. Protracted expeditions are, therefore, normally undertaken by higher level characters. Yeah, because you get beat up one day out of town, you got to turn around and run back into town at low levels. That's not an expedition type thing, right? Forays of limited duration are possible even for characters new to adventuring, and your DM might suggest that your party do some local exploration, perhaps to find some ruins in which is a site of a dungeon, or to find a friendly clan of dwarves, etc. Mounts are necessary, of course, as well as supplies, missile weapons, and the standard map making equipment. Here we go again. You got to be able to make maps or you're going to get lost out in the wilderness. And there are rules for getting lost in the wilderness. Not in this book, but in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Travel will be at a slow rate into unknown areas, for your party will be exploring, looking for foes to overcome, and searching for new finds of lost temples, dungeons, and the like. If the expedition continues for several days, there will be a need to hunt for game to provide food, unless some inhabited area is found, a thorp, a hamlet, a village, or a town, in which case your party will then be able to have another short adventure. Right, so you really could conceivably dedicate an entire campaign to just wandering around the countryside, exploring and mapping things as you went along. And that's entirely possible. I never set foot in a dungeon. This game is flexible enough to allow for that sort of thing. A dungeon is not absolutely required. Let's see, what else can we say as far as outdoors and stuff goes. In some ways, based on, maybe we should have mentioned this when we were talking about the dungeon aspect of it, dungeons are set for levels, and your challenges are specific to certain levels. The further down you go in the dungeon, the more difficult your challenges get. In the wilderness, it's what comes will. It's anything can be. 1 minute you can be hobnobbing with some goblins, and then another minute here comes that huge green dragon flying overhead because he's out cruising around looking for some food. So balance on encounters is a kind of a new concept and stuff going. And I like to think of the world as a difficult place. Not all of it is of your level. So this is where run, hide, negotiate. Perfect. The green dragon comes flying down. Maybe he's not really, really hungry, but he does like that magic sword you have. And hey, give me that sword and I'll just go away for a while.
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff. Yeah.
And that's one thing about outdoor encounters, which can also, of course, be looked at as sort of part of the whole of the mega dungeon. But the outdoor encounters, and I left a comment in there in the chat, is that becoming lost is a very serious issue, or can be, when you're outdoor and hex crawling and stuff. And it's a lot, generally a lot more possible. Plus, you not only can you encounter anything, but you're out in the open. If you're out in the wilderness, the chances of holing yourself up in a 10-foot by 10-foot room, spiking the door and getting some rest are, relatively nil. And you can come across war bands of a couple of hundred orcs or goblins.
Right.
You might end up tracking them and finding their lair. And you might even run across an actual dungeon in your hex crawling. And that's also a fantastic style of play, and it ties together with the dungeon. Outdoors, neglecting the important game aspects of that in a campaign should be done at your own detriment, I think, because it's it's really the basis for a lot of the fantasy stories and stuff that we've grown up with, and that influence the game.
Let me show this one here. That's why you need a ranger outdoors. Ranger will help you not get lost. Yes. Doesn't mean it's impossible. That'll help you not get lost. I mean, and the standard rules for getting lost in real life would apply to your hex crawl too. But you may be marching off in the wrong direction for a long time before you come across a creek or to go downstream with, or a road to follow one way or another, because roads eventually lead to civilization. However, it may not be a friendly civilization that road leads to. So, yeah, getting lost can be a real serious issue.
Right, and we're not dealing with any of the modern conveniences You know, it's not like these guys are running around with the handheld GPS, or if they're out on the ocean, you know, they've got their chart plotter or something like that. You know, so it's not linear, you know, as much as the dungeon. So dungeons typically they can have different types of layouts on the interior, but the wilderness is just typically tends to be wide open, and and I really like those types of adventures, you know,
Right.
and the effort put
And
into them.
and oh wow, shadow management. It's a new one. I wish this let me do the ats like YouTube does.
Right.
Well, I need to learn how to type. That might help a little bit too. Alrighty. Where was I going to go with? Oh, preparation and all this kind of stuff as well. You definitely need to prepare for outdoor adventures the same way as you do underground. Right. One of the biggest, and most people don't have fun with this kind of thing, but I like it is logistics. What do I need to bring with me? How much can I carry? This kind of thing. For deciding what I need to do, where I'm going, you know, spell planning and stuff like this. I think that's the game inside the game, and it is a lot of fun. And people call me a nerd for liking that kind of thing. So I think it's great. I think it's,
Yeah, me too. That happens to me too, and you know that's something else that the outdoor exploration really gives you, because it's an entirely different uh, set of equipment needs and provisioning and that sort of thing that you
Mhm.
need on a journey versus what you might need in a dungeon. You know, you go into the dungeon, typically you leave your horses and stuff behind, but in order to get to the dungeon, you need your horses. You're going to need your cart. You're going to need any of the various pieces of equipment that you need to properly travel outside, whether that be climbing gear or something like that,
I mean, there's
trailer
overlap,
iron
but
rations.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But you definitely need iron rations underground too, because a lot of the things down there you may not want to eat. You know,
Yeah, you
there's
probably
a
don't.
there's a dungeon cookbook or something out here or something like that. I'd like want to pick that up and see what it looks like, see what it says, right? But yeah, you know, these plants up here above ground look edible, but that slime underground does not. Yeah, I think
Yeah, I'll call it to serve dungeon. You know?
yes, that ochre jelly might look like a fried egg, but it is not one. Let me say
No, no, you probably don't want to eat that.
no, no, not at all. So we can go over this one into the town adventures too. Cities, towns, and sometimes even large villages provide the setting for highly interesting, informative, and often hazardous affairs and incidents. Even becoming an active character in a campaign typically requires interaction with the populace of the habitation, locating quarters, buying supplies and equipment, seeking information. Right? That's all avenues for role play right there. These same activities in a completely strange town require forethought and skill. Care must be taken in all one says and done. Questions about rank, profession, God, and alignment are perilous, and use of an alignment tongue is socially repulsive in most places. Here's where alignment tongue comes in handy. And you and I've had some private discussions on alignment tongue, and stuff like this, and why it is really a really good idea. Um, there are usually beggars, bandits, and drunks to be dealt with, greedy and grasping merchants and informants to do business with, inquiring officials or suspicious guards to be answered. The taverns house many potential helpful or useful characters, but they also contain clever and dangerous adversaries. There are the unlit streets and alleys of the city after dark, and what lies in wait in the deserted ruins of some lost ancient city. Eat and drink for the, I don't know, what is that, Dottie or Doughy? Depends on how you want
Yeah,
to
I
sort of
usually say
word.
Doty. I don't know.
Advanced D&D are right. Preparation for one of these adventures is highly important, and one can lead directly to another sort altogether. Right? and then the further on pages start describing some of those other things. But town adventure, right? You got to start somewhere. Nobody starts, naked in the wilderness and then wanders into a dungeon. But they prepare ahead of time. Preparing in the town where you know people and you know things is one thing because you'll be able to get fair prices and stuff on your equipment. But say the dungeon is past another town along the way. Oh yeah, I understood I know what it means. How do you say it? That's
Yeah, the pronunciation, right? Like he could have just used something like Hardy there, but it's
is it
Gary.
Dofty? Because in certain places you go, the OUGH is an off sound, right? So
Right, you might have a
depends on
draft.
whether you're using the Webster's or Oxford English Dictionary. I mean,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and the town tying to it. I think Gygax gave us a perfect example of that. It's often cited, of course, so much to become cliche, but Keep of the Borderlands kind of gives you that. The town isn't necessarily a town in the strict sense of the word, but it's a keep out on the
it's a,
Borderlands.
yeah, your
Yeah,
familiar
right,
place to
and
resupply, go back and restock and stuff like this. So but that's for basic Dungeons and Dragons, right? He created his own sort of thing that he wanted to put out as the beginner and move up through dungeons for advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and that is the Village of Hamlet and the Temple of Elemental Evil, right? You go visit a not so friendly town outside the Temple of Elemental Evil when you go to Nuln, and
right.
yeah, and there's role playing opportunities there while you're in Nuln getting your butt kicked by the inhabitants of that little town because it's under the influence of the temple. So it's not a friendly place to go refer to and stock up and stuff. Oh, here we go. So duty. Oh, we said duty on TV. All right. Good. Shadow management has now been hired, and he gets paid the same as we both get paid nothing to do all our dictionary lookups. Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah. So, and right there, we've described three different sets because you got to get back and forth from the town to the temple to Knoll. So there's outdoor adventure in there. Then you've got dungeon adventure, and when you get to the what was it? They call it your first foray there was it the ruin? That wasn't a ruined watchtower. It was the ruined oh moat house. Go to the moat
Right, the
house. Right?
ruins of the
So
Moat
there's your
House. Yeah.
first dungeon. That's the first level of it up above, and it is exceedingly hazardous to just stroll right in there unaware.
That is
Right?
not a friendly place, and not at all. Without giving away to people who haven't played it, it's just not.
Mhm.
And it lies basically right outside habitation. And or at
Mhm.
least the town sort of environment. And in the town, everybody knows it's there. There's sufficient separation so that they're not constantly at each other's throats. But
Mhm.
it really is. You're right to bring that up because it really is a master class in building something like this out. If you're a DM looking to get characters into an adventure, you can start with a small town, flesh that out, a wilderness area connecting the dungeon, and
Yep.
then look
And
at
then
all three of those and
let them
determine
go.
how they work together. Yeah, and just and let them loose. Make sure you have a provisioner in town. Maybe obviously a tavern or whatever you want to call it.
Mhm.
Maybe a hiring board or something, and that's worked ever since this. I mean, that's worked exceedingly well for any of a number of video games. Whether they be MMOs or standard CRPGs. It's just it's foundational.
Mhm. And right there, the whole premise, everything was built on, and it's just been expanded on a little bit, but nothing really new has been invented since then. All of it is still one of these three facets of the same adventure, right? And Player's Handbook for players, and right in the Player's Handbook, he's telling you exactly what the Dungeon Master is going to do. No veils or anything like this. He says the Dungeon Master is going to kill you. Be ready for it. Start preparing.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So going on from there, then you go a little further into the book, and then he starts describing the sorts of things that you could encounter, get drilling down in a level of detail, right? So traps, tricks, and encounters. During the course of an adventure, you will undoubtedly come across various forms of traps and tricks, as well as encounter monsters of one sort or another, while your DM will spend considerable time and effort to make all such occurrences effective. You and your fellow players must do everything within your collective power to make them harmless, unsuccessful, or profitable. On the other hand, you must never allow preparedness and caution to slow your party and make it ineffective in adventuring. By dealing with each category here, the best approach to negating the threat of a trap, trick, or encounter can be developed. So he's going to describe these sorts of things. So if you had no knowledge of any of this stuff at all, here's what this kind of stuff is like, and then you can start thinking. You know,
Yeah.
traps are aimed at confining, channeling, injuring, or killing characters. The last one, that's everybody does not like that part of it. I don't really like that part of it either so much. If you give plenty of warning, it's on you now. Confining traps are typified by areas which are closed by bars or stone blocks, although some might be pits with valves which close and can then only be opened by weight above. Most confinement areas will have another entrance by which a capturing or killing creature, plural, will enter later. It is usually impossible to avoid such areas as continual minute scrutiny makes exploration impossible and assures encounters with wandering patrolling monsters. When confined, prepare for attack, search for ways out, and beware of being channeled. Right. Channeling traps. Well, let's go all over your confinement traps. These are just things to get your players to start thinking, planning. Um, so they're not hazardous in and of themselves on that sort of thing. They're just ways to get your players somewhat frustrated and start making mistakes. Right. So here's
Right.
your warning to not, you know, remain calm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
you walk into a 20-foot by 20-foot chamber, with an open archway and a sliding stone door shuts behind you. And the sconces, the torches fire up out of nowhere, and that there don't appear to be any exits. Now you're stuck, right?
right. Well,
Um, and
there's a
it's
way in. There's possibly a way out. Now you got to start using those talents and stuff. Start thinking about things. Describing what you're going to be doing in the room. Use your imagination. To how would you get yourself out of this place? How would you find ways to get out of it? Yeah. Channeling traps are often related to confining ones. Yes, you can be confined or also channeled into something. Walls that shift and doors which allow entry but not egress are typical. I love those. While they cannot be avoided, such traps can be reacted to as much as a confining trap is. However, they also pose a problem of finding a way back. Careful mapping is a good remedy. Careful mapping is a good remedy, right? You keep track of these things. If you're making a good map and you come across, wait a minute, this corridor or nothing wasn't here before. On my map, this should be this. This particular piece is somehow beyond it. How do we get around this? What's the point behind this to get us back to that spot? All right. So mapping.
Yeah, channeling, falling victim to a channeling trap or whatever is not particularly favorable. Falling victim to it twice is 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 unpreparedness and or general confusion or laziness or whatever the case may be.
I like shoots that drop you down to the fourth level, and you're only second level character. Oh
Right.
no.
How the heck do I get back?
And
Yeah.
I have no idea where I'm at either. So yeah.
Yeah, you start a new piece of graph paper and you ask the DM, "Hey, should I start it in the middle or on one of the edges?" And if he's particularly charitable, he might share that with you to make things a little easier.
Yeah. No, start this one in the middle, and if you go off the page, grab another page.
Right.
Injuring traps, traps which wear the strength of the party away prior to attaining of their goal, are serious. Typical injuring traps are blades which scythe across corridor when a stone in the floor is stepped on, arrows which fire when a trip rope is yanked, or spears released when a door is opened. Use of a pole or spears as a prod ahead might help with these, and likewise, such prod could discover pits in the floor. A safe remedy is to have some healing at hand, potions or spells, so as to arrive relatively undamaged. Right, your injuring traps are designed to whittle away at your resources while you are in there adventuring. Yeah, that's the whole point behind them is weaken the party and stuff as they move
Traps
through.
of attrition.
Right. Killing traps are typical of important areas or deep dungeon levels. I don't like killing traps so much as they're much not nearly as fun as like the injuring or the channeling or something, right? Um, but they're there, they exist. Deep pits with spikes, poison missiles, poison spikes, because poison kills automatically. Save or die. A lot of players don't like the save or die mechanic of poison, and in some ways I kind of agree with them, so I vary it up a little bit depending on my monster.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, a spider's poison
Well,
isn't necessarily to kill his prey; it's to make it paralyzed and immobile so he can wrap it up. Yeah,
yeah, and with a properly prepared group of adventurers, it becomes a little bit less of a concern. When you have a cleric, you have a druid, like the stuff we've talked about previously in this
hmm
series on spells and the different character classes and how they fit in. And I think with killing traps, there's a place for killing traps, like in an adventure, a tournament module, like Tomb of Horrors or something like that. That's just what it is, right? And everybody knows sort of what they're getting when they go into it. If it's a meaningful campaign type of adventure, I think that if you're going to use killing traps, they should be used relatively sparingly, and there should be every opportunity for smart players uh, to be able to
to
get
avoid
around
them.
it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
some of these other ones in here, yeah, deep pits with spikes. You can find ways through those if you find the pit. Poison missiles, poison spikes, shoots to fire pits, floors which tilt deposit the party into a pool of acid. Or before an angry red dragon, i.e., 10-ton blocks which fall from the ceiling, or locked rooms which flood are examples of killing areas. Again, observation and safety measures, pole spikes thrown ahead, rope, etc., will be of some help, and luck will have to serve as well. Right. This is the player end of it, but we can talk briefly about the dungeon master side of it. If you're going to include these things, you need to telegraph them. Can anyone find traps? The short answer to that one is yes. Anybody can find a trap. Usually, the fighter finds it by stumbling into it. Hey, look, I'm on fire. This is a trap. so, but
Right.
um, if we go back to
And
like
like this
this,
says,
yeah,
oh,
if you,
sorry. Like this says, you can
yeah,
throw things. The 10-foot pole is a way of finding a trap, but that's sort of like blundering into it. But you can throw things ahead. You can cast spells ahead. You can do these kinds of things.
right,
And finding a trap is a much different animal than removing the trap,
sure,
right? So if you're tapping ahead in a dungeon, there's a reasonable expectation that you might be able to find a trap and avoid it, but disarming that trap is another matter, and that's where the specialist, the thief, or whatever comes into play.
right. Should never be just a die roll. Should never be just a die roll. Describe to me what you are looking for. Describe to
Agreed.
me what you're doing to find these things. Right? Get them to use their imagination. Can anyone find traps in original? Was it original? At least basic Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody has for the most part, a 1 in 6 chance of discovering a trap. Um, Over and above that, thieves had a better chance and stuff like this. For even though it's not specifically said as such for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, if my players are describing to me what they're looking for, how they're moving through, and this kind of stuff as they're going through the dungeon, and those sorts of actions would reveal the presence of a trap or something. A fighter could find a trap that way, you know, no problem, because they're using their head, they're playing the game, they're describing to me things that they want to do. If they're just walking blindly through, I'm not going to give them any chance at all of locating the trap if they're just stomping through the dungeon trying to trigger everything. So
Right.
the answer to this
I
question
agree with
is
that.
yes, but the thief has specifically designed to um, have enhanced chances of discovering these things as opposed to just blundering through stuff. Now,
Right. And
we
the
discussed
thief is one
the monk.
example.
The monk was the other
W-
one with those abilities. That's why I like the monk out of Dungeon Magazine, Dragon Magazine 53, because they have the ability to discover traps but not disarm them. Your thief has the ability, as long as he's describing things successfully, of rendering these things inoperable or something. You also have spells,
Right.
and that's part of your prep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And any trap, whether or not it's perceptible as such, is going to have a trigger, right? So clever players can very easily say, I'm gonna tap forward ahead of me. I'm gonna walk as lightly as I can. I'm gonna look up at the ceiling. I'm gonna feel along the wall for any sort of strange protrusions. Now, it might not necessarily mean that, if I say, hey, yeah, actually there's a brick that seems a little loose and it's out of place and sticking out about a quarter of an inch. Okay, you just probably found a trap or you found a secret, whatever, but you're not going to be able to glean as much information without further exploration of that thing as maybe a
yep.
thief is going to do off of, okay, we need to bring the thief up to have a look at this. And maybe the thief has experience with those types of things where, a die roll is warranted.
Yeah, yeah. Not
That's
anyone
true.
can disarm a trap, but anyone can be disarmed by a trap. Yeah, yeah, one of those injuring traps could very well do that to you, right? In summation, any trap can be bad, and many can mean a character or the entire party's demise. Having proper equipment with the party, we just mentioned that, a cleric for healing, of course, a dwarf for trap detection. Well, because one of the things about, I don't know, we specifically talked too much about the individual races so much, but dwarves, some of their skills is, especially underground, construction tricks and things like this. That's what their skill set based on what the imagining was that this race did. So having a dwarf in your party can help you figure these things out as you're moving through. Magic user to knock open doors and locks go a long way. Yeah, that door closed. Oh well, cast knock. Bam, okay, now it's open again. So that
Right.
confining trap has now been defeated by a spell. Yeah. Go a long way towards reducing the hazard. Observation and clever deduction, as well as proper caution, should negate a significant portion of traps. Right. That's why I mentioned there. Describe to me what you're doing when you're in here. What are you looking for? Yeah. And that'll help mitigate this particular risk. Tricks. Now, this is something that's not used as often, but it can be a whole lot of fun if you're using them right. The Dungeon Master's Guide has the role for the random dungeon of a trick, and also there's a section in there which describes a lot of different in a table full of different types of tricks and things like this. But you can read any book and figure out tricks and stuff like this that would do well in a dungeon um, for messing with your players, right? So many tricks can be used that it is quite impossible to thoroughly detail any reasonable cross section here. As imagination is the only boundary for what sort of tricks can be placed in a dungeon, it is incumbent upon the players to use their own guile. Many tricks are irksome only, others are irksome and misleading. Here's one, right? Assume that there are several rooms with a buzzing sound discernible by those who listen at doors and or enter them. Does this cause the party to prepare for battle only to find nothing? Or is there some trick of acoustics which allows sound from a nearby hive of giant wasps to permeate the rooms? If the latter, the party might grow careless and enter yet another buzzing room unprepared so as to be surprised by angry wasps. Right? Your tricks and stuff should sooner or later lead to something. Maybe not necessarily what the players wanted, but it should lead to something. Illusions can annoy, delay, mislead, or kill a party. There can be illusionary creatures, pits, fires, walls, and so on. But consider an illusion of a pile of gold cast upon a pit of vipers. Slanting or sloping passages, um, space distortion areas, and teleporters are meant to confuse or strand the party. I love the teleporters in the Eye of the Beholder game was because I it took me a while to figure that one out.
That was a great game too for just one of those classic like 2D dungeon crawlers or what. Well, pseudo 3D,
Yeah,
but that was a great game. I loved it when it came out.
yeah. I had my grandson playing those last summer when he was visiting, and he was having a blast.
Nice.
Let's see. Confuse or strand the party. They foul maps, right? Because now you're somewhere else and you think you're here, but you continue mapping, but that's incorrect because you're no longer in the spot where you thought you were. Take the group to areas they did not wish to enter. Yeah, hey, there was a red dragon over there. Oh, guess where this wall is pushing us to, and so on. The same is true of sinking, rising, elevator rooms, sliding rooms, and chutes. As an example of the latter, consider a chute at the bottom of a pit or one at the end of a corridor which slopes upwards, so that the effect is to deposit the party on the original level, but seemingly one deeper. Rooms can turn so as to make directions wrong. Secret doors can open into two areas if they are properly manipulated, and seemingly harmless things can spell death. Tricks are best countered by forethought and discernment, right? Describe to me what you're doing. What are you looking for? How did what are you figuring out? And then sooner or later, you're going to click on the clue. Hey, wait a minute. This isn't the hallway we're in. We just teleported somewhere, right? They can be dealt
Right.
with a prepared, careful party, but rashness can lead to real trouble. I've run with players who were bulls in a china shop, plowing through the dungeon to just get through it, and these sorts of things. They ran into a whole lot of trouble with this. Your DM will be using his imagination and wit to trick you, which is why I like running groups for long-term gamers because these guys know all this stuff, and I got to be on my toes. And you must use your faculties to see through or at least partially counter such tricks. So, not as widely used, but still very useful for, and some of this stuff can be quite hilarious. Noises that are
Yeah.
down the corridor and stuff like this. There's a magic mouth that every now and then, all it does, the only thing it ever does is that it hoots like an owl when somebody walks past, right? But it's concealed behind some sort of tapestry or something like this, so you can't hear, you don't know where it's coming from, and that kind of stuff. Or you know, you got a tall mirror at the end of one hole, and if they're using light sources, it looks like they're looking um, at a blank wall when they get there, but as they get closer, they realize, hey, wait a minute, it's an angle across the corridor. It's just showing a reflection of the wall. So now we got something we can get
Right.
around, and yeah. Oh, and that's just a blank. That's a dead end hole. Let's not go down that way. And there was the way out. Was right there. It was just that
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
little tricks like that can be a lot of fun. Encounters. Here's another one here. Monster. Right. That's whatever. And a monster is just a generic term. The monster is something that the player characters have to deal with. Whether it's a non-player character, whether it's a true monster or animals in the forest or something, just blanket calling everything monsters is a way of just reducing the amount of stuff we got to type. Yeah. Yeah, monster can be a kindly wizard or a crazed dwarf. What has this guy got against dwarves? Um, a friendly bass dragon or a malicious manticore. Such are the possibilities of encounters in dungeon, wilderness, or town. Anywhere you can get any of these sorts of things, right? Chance meetings are known as encounters with wandering monsters. Now, a lot of people don't like wandering monsters, but I like the wandering monsters from the standpoint that it makes your world seem alive, lived in. you're not the only one there just wandering around in the woods. There's other creatures moving around, other players, other races. That's where you got the non-player character party that you can encounter, right? That the dungeon master may have. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world that is just not all centered around you and your story or the story that you're following. There's other things that are happening. They're following their stories. So a random encounter is intended to make the world feel lived in, as far as that goes, as
Right.
far as immersion and things go. A random encounter in Dungeons and Dragons for the dungeon master is to deplete you of resources.
Yeah, yeah. It's a more attritional stuff, right? And
Yeah.
and it keeps the party on their toes. And without random encounters, particularly in the event that, let's say you're on a hex crawl or in a dungeon that you haven't
Sure.
fully populated. There's some sort of you're working off of some sort of large map or something. Without those random encounters, they cut down on the DM's prep work and also keep the DM and the players on their toes, because even if you
Mhm.
craft a wandering monster chart yourself, which I encourage, that's directly related to the area that the characters are traversing, you still might end up rolling something at a time when you would have not chose it, or rolling something that's not what you would have chose. It's a fun random element to the game that also serves the purposes of running down the resources of the characters, making sure everybody realizes the importance of moving along in a structured
Mhm.
and normal manner, and they can just be fun.
Another thing, as far as wandering monsters go, and especially dungeons and stuff like this, the monsters aren't just sitting in these rooms waiting for the players to come by and pounce on them. They may be on their way to the surface to go see if they can't hunt down their own deer to bring down for their lunch and dinner and bring it back down into the dungeon. You know, they're moving around in there, and if you and we definitely need to do a stream on good dungeon design and stuff like this. If you're using factions or something, maybe this is a little sortie from one faction trying to go to the territory of another faction, and you just happen to bump into them, right? And even though there are different factions fighting each other in the dungeon, they hate you worse. So
Right, right. And outdoors, running into one of these, say a raiding party or an exploratory force or something like that,
Mhm.
might end you up in a situation where you can wait for them to pass by and then follow their tracks to see where they came from. Chance and lair and stuff like that. You might
Yep.
use a wandering monster as a player, as a matter of chance that actually ends up being highly favorable to you for uncovering treasure or finding another
Yeah.
location that you weren't previously familiar with, right?
I mean, some of the descriptions of some of these monsters in there, if you get the jump on them and you get the better of them, they will, they'll give up and reveal the location of their treasure or something like this if you let them live. So not everything has to be a fight to the death or something. There's ways of finding pockets of gold without lifting a finger, right?
Right.
Um, Finding a creature where it has been placed by the referee is usually referred to as a set encounter. Wandering monsters are things that are out drifting around, an encounter that's specific to a room. One of the things that I noticed about some of the wandering monster tables is that some of the monsters on there I wouldn't have wandering around in a dungeon. The Otiog. The Otiog isn't going to go around searching for things. He's going to sit near the bottom of a pit or a slide or something and camp there, right? Because his dinner's going to be
Hmm.
coming to him, right? Whereas, you know, um, other monsters are going to be out, like gelatinous cube is going to be there scouring the dungeon looking for something to food. So that's definitely that wouldn't be a set encounter anywhere. That would be a wandering encounter at all times. Wandering monsters can be totally random or pre-planned, right? I do this a lot too. If I'm stuck, I'll roll something up at random right off the table in there, but it takes a little bit to go. But I'll have monsters that are in a list or something that are moving through this area, and I've got all this stuff ready to go. There's only a chance that they may be encountered by you, so it's prepared, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to run into it. A party wandering in the woods outdoors or on a deserted maze in the dungeon might run into nearly any sort of monster. If the woods were home of a tribe of centaurs or the dungeon level 1 constructed by a band of orcs, certain prescribed encounters would randomly occur. However, at prescribed intervals, your DM will generate a random number to find any meeting with a wandering monster occurs. Right, that's what again getting into it right here. Right, avoiding or fleeing such encounters is often wise, for combat wears down party strength, and wandering monsters seldom have any worthwhile treasure. Just because you run across something doesn't mean you got to stop and fight it, you know, and it's going to wear you down. There's not a whole lot of XP just on the monster itself. It's gold for XP. We'll talk about that one day too. If monsters pursue, you can consider hurling down food or treasure behind. Thus, the pursuing monsters may be lured into stopping to eat or gather coins or gems. When confrontation is unavoidable, well, it depends on what it is. If you got werewolves chasing you and you throw down gems, they don't care.
No, no, they'll come back for those after they've
Right. When
finished you
confrontation
off.
is unavoidable, be wary of tricks, finish off hostile creatures quickly, and get on with the business of the expedition. As determination of chance encounters is usually a factor of time, do not waste it. A lot of these things, random encounters, are delaying tactics. You've got a certain set of time you need to accomplish a particular goal. We'll throw some random encounters in there to see if you waste your time on those random encounters. Yeah. And do not waste it in your party endlessly checking walls for secret doors. Yeah, if you constantly checking for secret doors, I'm going to pop something big in there just to encourage you to keep moving. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Listening.
and sorry, that's a valid use of wandering
Yeah.
monsters. Like if we didn't have them, then sort of the idea of tricks and traps and other encounters are not really nearly as useful, right? Because the players will simply say, "Okay, I'm going to take as much time as possible to ensure that there's nothing down this hallway. I don't care if it takes all day." Yeah, and there has to be some sort of risk associated with spending too much time, and wandering monsters are perfect for that.
Right. That same thing with, like I mentioned here, listening at every door. I know characters, they listen everywhere. Right. Well, if you read the Dungeon Master's Guide, Gary Gygax talks about dungeon doors. Is you got to take all your equipment and all that kind of stuff off to listen at the door. You got a low chance of hearing anything through it. Some of the monsters are really silent. On the other hand, dungeon doors are really thick, heavy structures. You have to have a considerable noise on the other side for you to hear it. So,
Yeah, and take a lot of time.
yep. So you're listening at that door, and I'm going to roll that. Oh, look at the D6 hit a 1. Well, that monster decided he's hungry. He's going to fling open that door and go hunt in his dungeon looking for food. Oh, look, you're standing right there with your helmet
Yeah.
off too. Yeah. Let's see. As noise is a factor, your DM will consider the attraction of additional monsters. Right. I love it when players sit there and argue about what they want to do. Right. I'll give them a couple of seconds to go for it, but if they still haven't resolved what they want to do after a couple of seconds and they continue arguing, I'm going to assume that they're not just the players are arguing amongst one another, but their characters are also standing in there in the middle of the dungeon, arguing with each other, and here comes a monster. Right. As a noise is a factor, your DM will consider the attraction of additional monsters. Never argue or discuss what course of action your party is to follow in an open place or for long periods. A fight will take time and cause plenty of noise, so move on quickly after combat with wandering monsters. Yeah, I do that frequently. I'll have a wandering monster encounter in there, and you guys get into if the flight is a little protracted, I'll throw another encounter right after it because they heard it and they come running to investigate. Right, so
Right.
yeah. A fight will take time and cause plenty of noise, so move on quickly after combat with wandering monsters. Pre-planning and organization are essential to all successful play, no less here than elsewhere. Yes, set encounters are meetings with monsters placed by your DM. All such encounters will be in or near the monster or monsters, plural, lair. So, unlike encounters with wandering monsters, these incidents promise a fair chance for gain if the monster or monsters are successfully dealt with. And a successful expedition is usually aimed at a particular monster or group of lairs discovered during previous excursions. Note a lair is wherever the monster dwells, even such places as a castle, guardhouse, temple, or other construction. Right? Your wandering monster could just be a knight. Here's a good question: is there an actual advantage to listening at a door? Yes. Right? Um, Careless monsters could be on either like a group of orcs and they're playing cards or something, right? Drinking ale or whatever it is. They should be listening or watching, but they're in there arguing about whatever's going on with, and these are orcs. What are they doing? They're arm wrestling or something like this. They're making noise on the other side of the door. That would be something that you could hear, right? So there are some advantages to listening at the doors. It's not that you won't ever hear any noise. It's just that endlessly listening at every door does not produce a lot of results.
Right. And as the group of players or a player in the group of players, if you actually hear something behind that door, that gives you an opportunity that you wouldn't have normally had to fully prepare for what it is you might encounter beyond. Certain things like a bless spell. A bless spell only takes effect on people who aren't already in a melee. Right.
Yep.
So you hear a monster behind the door, the priest or the cleric can go ahead and cast a bless spell. The wizard can prepare for whatever he wants to do. The magic user can prepare for whatever he wants to do. Thief can get ready. Fighter can get ready. Your guy with the greatest strength can attempt to force open the door and get the drop on the monsters, which might give you an advantage on your surprise roll.
Always want advantages if you can take them, right? So listening at a door could produce some results to give you an advantage for a possible encounter on the other side. Just know the way that dungeons are designed, there is not going to be an encounter behind every door. So you kind of got to be, I don't know what's a good word for it, conservative with the number of doors you listen behind. Right. Look for clues and stuff that are outside the door that may be an indication that there's something on the other side. You know, look at this little, what are all these little broken chicken bones out here outside this door here in this little pile? Hey, there might be something inside that room that just discards their trash out in the hole, waiting for the gelatinous cube to come by and clean it up. Yeah. All encounters have elements of movement and surprise. Previously discussed, we talked about surprise and movement a few streams back, as well as initiative, communication, negotiation, and or combat. Right? These aspects of adventuring, as well as damage, healing, saving throws, obedience, and morale, must now be considered. We'll be talking about some of those, not all of them tonight, but we'll get to. I have some more in here that I thought we'd talk about. Any more that you want to do about encounters?
No. I really like this section, and as a player, as a player who's not who's not familiar with being on the other side of the screen. Just reading this can be extremely informative, and I think all players should set aside some time to read these particular sections of the PHB, really regardless of whatever type of fantasy game they're playing or whatever. It teaches you
any game,
yeah, exactly, and it also teaches the DM. There's a lot of strategy here, and Gary's basically coming out and saying, hey, this is what I'm going to try to do to you, and here are some ways that you can try to excel in your play and avoid those things from coming to pass. But I'm not going to make it easy on you.
No, I mean, Gary Gygax, yes, right. The one thing you needed to defeat that encounter is in that encounter's treasure hoard. Yeah.
right.
Communication, right? So we'll talk a little bit about some of the role-playing aspects of it, stuff that's coming into it here. Communication, right? In order to determine the intent of possibly friendly or neutral monster, or to pass along your intentions or desires, some form of communication is necessary. Speech might do for human types, as the common tongue is known by most. But what of an encounter with giant, blink dogs, or dozens of similar creatures? An open and raised right hand is possible, and simply refraining from hostile moves will possibly allow for further exchange. Remember, though, that you cannot bribe a band of ogres to allow you to pass through unless you can communicate clearly. Yeah. All right, so that's part of it too, is it's where you include languages and stuff like this.
Right.
and the languages that these creatures and stuff speak, and your ability to talk to them. And there's spells that help you with that, right? So properly preparing, hey, we're going to an expedition through this forest, and in this forest there's a bunch of this particular type of creature. Hey, I got a spell that allows us to communicate with that type of animal. Bang, and we're set, right? So you prepare that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and in communication in this section is also a cautionary
Yeah.
point of advice for
Hmm.
players, right? You don't need to run through there attacking everything. Communicating with things is particularly
Hmm.
helpful if you want to have, if you want to gain some of the higher levels and earn the right to name your character, right?
Oh yeah, right. Don't name your character till you at least get to level 3. You'd like to get to level 3, talk to some of those monsters, right? So they don't eat you at
Right.
level 1. Um, and this the next section on there, negotiation, and it plays into it too. But it's not included in the player's handbook because it's not really a player facing thing. But the Dungeon Master's Guide has your reaction rules and how to deal with reactions and encounters between characters. Right, your charisma plays into it. The luck of a die roll. That's why you have the racial preferences table there. Who likes who? That kind of stuff that helps all of that around into the communication and negotiation parts of an encountering. Just because you encounter something that normally eat humans doesn't necessarily mean it is hungry for humans right now.
Right.
Yeah, most DMs love communication and negotiations, for this allows them to assume an active role in actual play. Your referee will assume the persona proper to the creature your party is dealing with, be it shy and hostile, stupid, greedy, helpful, misinformed, or whatever. You know, intelligent monsters will always balance the offer versus the expectation. A lone ogre is likely, even with his rather dim wit, to recognize that a strong party will kill him if he attacks or demands too much. So a small bribe is better than a risky combat to get flesh to eat and petty baubles to have, right? On the other hand, weakness will be exploited by any basically hostile monster unless it seems certain that more can be gained by other action. Be resigned to pay amounts in excess of the actual value received. As a player, you must earn what you gain. Negotiation usually gives you a chance to get on with the earning process, or live to come back and fight another day. Always be wary with and use your wits. Look for all facets of a situation and then use your best judgment accordingly. In many cases, a payment, bribe, toll, share, or ransom fee will enable success or survival. A negotiation is a useful tool to the expert adventurer. Right, your dungeon master should be communicating these sorts of things to you at the encounter, what the demeanor of them is. When you you found that group of 20 orcs coming around the bend in the forest, and you didn't have enough time to run hide, right? He should be telling you, what are they, what do I observe from these orcs when they see us? Do they automatically draw weapons and get hostile? Are they standing a little bit aloof? They look interested or disinterested, don't care. They're letting their leader negotiate, so the rest of them are getting kind of bored, right? What is, and that signals to the players, um, do they need to negotiate? Can they communicate? You know, um, Not everything is going to be them running out of the woods to beat on you, and that shouldn't be that way. The game master should never set things up that it's every monster is in there to just outright kill everybody, um, unless, again, like you said here, they can see clearly that they have an advantage. Because most of the monsters you're going to encounter may be evil, right? And their whole intention is to find some food. A lone ogre, yeah, he's still a bad guy, right? You know,
Right, but just like for the players operate under the assumption of risk and reward, right?
yeah,
They should. If the risk is too great for the commensurate reward, then maybe we shouldn't do that. Monsters are going to look at it the same way, at least humanoid ones or ones with intelligence.
yeah,
Now, and then you've got the other types of creatures, your more primal creatures, your reptiles and things like that. They're going to probably operate off of flight or flee type of response, where they look and
sure.
try to determine whether you. I agree with you completely, and with what this says that an encounter shouldn't necessarily from either side almost ever be sort of an instant attack. There's also always some sort of assessment from both sides that takes place therein.
Sometimes that assessment was, these guys have been laying in an ambush waiting for a small party like yours to come by.
Right.
And I described to you the ambush before you walked into it.
Yeah. And even when we're dealing with creatures that aren't particularly intelligence, that have low or medium intelligence, those creatures, they know how to operate in their surroundings. They know how to operate with what skills they have available to them, their abilities, their senses, and all of these things. So just because a creature is low intelligence doesn't mean that it's not cunning and skilled at using its environment and its abilities to its advantage.
Sure. I mean, and as far as this goes, your communication, negotiation, and assessment, that lone ogre doesn't have a whole lot of treasure on his own, but he lives somewhere. He's not out wandering hundreds of miles from his lair somewhere. You negotiate with him a little bit, let him go, let him stomp off into the woods, and then your ranger tracks him. So if you really want to kill him, that's the best way of doing it, because he's probably going to end up leading you right back to the lair. You don't have to kill him outright and have that ranger try to find tracks to go back. Right? Use some smarts with that sort of encounter, right?
Yeah. It makes for a better game.
Oh, yeah. Much more fun. And I don't do funny voices or anything like that. I just get to say what they say. Yeah. Morale. This is where I'm leading up to in all of this when we talk about encounters, negotiating, all that. That's why I chose this particular paragraph. Player characters should never have to roll for morale or anything like that. You're the ultimate decision if you want to sacrifice yourself or just run away to fight another day. There's no die roll or anything that covers that. However, everybody else, you're going to have a morale. Morale properly refers to the state of mind of troops during combat or stress situations. Stupid creatures tend to fight to the death. Well, yeah. Or depends on how bad they are. They either fight to the death or they fight till they're really, really hurt, and then they try to run away. Right. So do creatures with a set purpose in mind. Elite guards, fanatical creatures. Right. Your character will never have to check morale status, nor will any other player character, for each player provides this personally. Some are brave, some are foolish, some are cautious, some are cowardly. Your character's henchmen will probably have to check morale. So too will hirelings. Powerful monsters will never check morale, and even weak ones will probably not do so as long as they have leadership. Okay. When you require your henchmen and or hirelings to take risks which your character is not personally taking, they're not going to like that. Or when in hazardous situations with or without your character, or when faced with defeated and fleeing enemy just overcome, or when given the prospect of rich loot. These are times when the campaign referee will usually require morale checks. Obedience, actions, reactions, etc. will be decided by such morale checks. But again, this is not your players, but these are the other non-player characters that you're interacting with will run these morale checks. And you can influence those by your charisma and by greasing the skids a little bit there, right? In addition to the influence your character's charisma has, a loyalty rating of henchmen and hirelings will be influenced by past treatment, the current situation, and the behavior of any of their fellows nearby. Your lieutenants, if any, will provide a steadying influence, right? You've got leadership. Higher level characters are unlikely to have poor morale unless they are faced with an obviously hopeless situation, at least as far as they can see it, and or when they are low in hit points, when it's time to, hey, discretion is better part of valor, right? If you treat your henchmen and hirelings fairly, pay them well, and give them arms and equipment which allow them to effectively engage in combat by maximizing their protection and offensive potential, their morale base will be good. Furthermore, if you do not require them to take risks which your character does not take, if their mortality is not high, and their master does not abandon them to their fate as long as another course is possible, the troops will likely be firm in the face of nearly any threat. Lack of action, setbacks, and similar things reduce morale. A good player pays strict attention to these considerations. Right now, the dungeon master is looking for all of these exact same things on a lot of the encounters that you're coming across. Right, so that plays into the communication and negotiation. You can suss out those sorts of things that are going on with some of these encounters um, just by negotiation and communication with them. These guys seem a little scared. How'd you figure that out? By talking to them. The dungeon masters kind of led us on to thinking that there's something going on with these guys. That if we hit that leader there and take him down fast, the rest of them are going to bolt, and the fight is going to be done. Right? Those kind of plans and actions come through the communicating and negotiation. If you just jump on everybody, you're missing a big piece of the fun part of the game, of the role playing part of the game, and the communication
It
and
really is.
parts of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the essence of role playing, right? Not just necessarily doing what it is that you think your character would do, or do the funny voice or whatever it is, but actually try to put the character in the position, or for the DM to put his characters, NPCs and whatnot, in the place and position that they find themselves in, and try to imagine, based on attributes and skills and specialties and all that, and levels, hit dice, hit points, what they would realistically do in those circumstances, right? And more often than not, morale, communication, negotiations, those types of things are going to come into play. I mean, otherwise you may as well. That's one of the key differences to me between a role playing game and, say, a board game. But I like to role play board games, but I'm just weird, so you know.
I see. Now you're mouthing off the narration of the pawn as he moves across the board. Yeah. Oh, oh,
Yeah.
here's my knight. My knight says, "Well, what? Whoa, hold on a minute. Yeah. Push the clock."
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty much what I had laid out on here tonight. I figured what we had would at least cover an hour, and I think we've done a lot of that. Is there anything else we want to cover with the subjects that I threw out here? We got a few good questions in here tonight too about this stuff. This was great. Yeah, some good.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I really like the format and how you laid this out. I think it was the logical next step to the series, and this morale. All of these sections really. Especially this morale section talking about henchmen and hirelings and stuff like that, and invites people to go back and look at the henchman video that we just recently did, or the
Yep.
video that included henchmen, to get an idea as a dungeon master of how you might apply some of these circumstances, because there are guidelines out there, and
Yes.
differences in percentages to the role based on how these guys have been treated, what their mortality rate is like, what you're asking them to do. The hireling or henchman, while being a key part of the expeditioning party, which is the real takeaway here, just because you say, hey, listen, I'll give you 10 extra gold if you go down that hallway and open that door, we're going to stay right here, doesn't necessarily guarantee that guy's going to do it.
Nope.
You should treat
Keep
your
the gold and
hirelings.
you do it. Yeah.
Yeah, you should treat your hirelings and your henchmen the same way you treat
Yeah.
your character.
And from what I've noticed, there's not a lot of hirelings and henchmen in a lot of the newer iterations of the world's most popular role playing game.
That's a shame.
And it's a good piece of it. Now, it's a lot of extra work for the dungeon master. It really is to play not only his monsters and stuff on his side, but to also be the persona of some of those hirelings and stuff, right? Especially if it's on the negative side. They're not being treated well by their players and stuff. Are they going to desert? Are they going to switch sides at the earliest opportunity if they have to? Yes.
Yeah,
There is extra work in running them, but it is a good part of the game.
Hey, Yang. Yeah, and there's particularly extra work, if you've got, say you're a DM and you've got a smaller group and you've got some high powered hirelings, that, or high-powered henchmen rather, that end up being critical to the success of the group as a whole. And you have to really make independent decisions on those guys. But for the most part, in a decent sized group of players, and henchmen and hirelings that aren't aren't like expected to be DM NPCs or DM PCs and that sort of thing.
Right. That's another thing too that kind of went that well, early on, younger, newer players and stuff to this game, they took that opportunity of the players hiring hirelings to throw their own character into the mix, the DM PC, and run their own character with the party and kind of try to direct the group. And that's not what this was about. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we definitely hit on some really, really good subjects. I'm going to go in there and pick some more stuff about this out of the book. Let's see. Oh, I must be talking to Yang. Caught your interview with Bill over on Dean and Vicky's. Nice hearing a little about the 1E side of the equation. Okay. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's related to Yang's Empire of the Undying Sun, right? I didn't catch the stream, but yeah.
Everybody that's in here listening range to us, please go support Yang's channel as well. At Yang and
Absolutely.
Yes. And his setting. If you're looking for a new setting to go, maybe take a look at his. Yeah. Well, if we don't got nothing else to talk about this evening, we're running for about an hour and a half, which is about average for us. I guess we started out a little slower, and then now we've had, because we can ramble on for weeks on this stuff. So
yeah, I could talk all night still at this point, with just even you. So yeah, thanks for putting this together, and thanks for running it and reading it and all of that stuff. Very enjoyable.
Yeah, and thanks for hopping on here and talking with this stuff with me again. This has been a whole lot of fun, and I'm having a good time. And fortunately, since there is a whole lot to do with first edition Dungeons and Dragons, we'll be doing this for a lot longer.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
All right, I'm going to cut you loose then, and then we will
Yes, sir.
Cut the stream short. We'll catch up with you later. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining me here on the Great Old Ones channel, talking more about the first edition Dungeons and Dragons again. If you enjoyed this content, if you would please like and subscribe, hit that bell icon for notifications, and you'll be notified for any more content and stuff that we got coming up. We have lots more planned to talk about first edition and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, except for next week. Not sure when you're watching this video, but May 7th, I won't have a stream. I got to get up Dark 30 on May 8th and do some drills and stuff, so I won't be doing a stream. But I'm pretty sure Doom Swords will put something on in the place and talk about more stuff, first edition Dungeons and Dragons, if you want to drop by and visit his channel too. Otherwise, we'll pick up again in 2 weeks and talk about some more stuff. So thanks again for joining, liking the stream. Leave some comments, stuff, give us some ideas and stuff you'd like to hear about. If you didn't get a chance to get a question in, leave it in the comments and we'll do our best to answer it. So thanks again for coming out and visiting us. We'll see you again soon.